to another episode. If you're new here, hi, I'm Madison. I am a medium, a Reiki master, and I also do Akashic Records. Today we are talking about my strangest paranormal experiences as a medium. So I have been able to see and connect with spirits since I was a kid. And so I've had a plethora of spirits that I've come into contact with just in general. And then very much since I started doing this kind of work and started really seeking out why do I have these gifts and what am I supposed to do with them, there started to be more and more experiences that have opened up. And I want to share them with you guys because one of the biggest things that I feel like is really misunderstood in the world of spirituality is people who have gifts where they're interacting with past loved ones or spirits. Some people are really afraid, some people don't understand what it all means, and there's also some common themes that I see come through that have sort of been shared with me as maybe imagery that you might use to kind of tell a story. So we're going to get into all of that today. So let's get into how I got into doing mediumship work. So I was really in a place where I actually used to do corporate HR for about 10 years. I have a master's degree in HR. Some point along the journey, I was like, I can't do this for like 30, 40 more years. I started doing HR when I was probably 21. By the time I was 30, I was like, I literally can't do this anymore. So I probably 30 years old or so quit my corporate job that I've kind of done the climbing the ladder and getting the education and all of that to get. And I know I'm supposed to do something with my spiritual gifts, but I don't really know what it is. So at this point, this is when I started doing a lot of work in the Akashic Records, specifically around soul purpose. So I was really like, hey, spirit guides, like my spiritual gifts will not go away. So if they're not going to go away, what am I supposed to do with them? And I really felt like there was no answer that came through, like not a clear like next step, right? So probably like a week ago or a week later, I go on this retreat to Costa Rica and I have this random roommate and her parents come to me with a message for her the very first night. And it takes me like the entire retreat to tell her. I tell her on the last night. I'm like, hey, crazy thing, your parents came to me with a message for you. And so I share this message with her and she basically tells me that she has been kind of like praying or like seeking out the answers to these questions. And I was like, okay. So similar how I've used mediumship to heal my own grief, I can connect with others' past loved ones and act as that channel to help them resolve their own grief. Fascinating, right? And that actually is what got me into like, okay, well, if I can do mediumship for other people, can I do Akashic Records for other people? Can I do Reiki for other people? Because those were all modalities I was already using in my current life, but I'd never really been like, oh wait, I can use them to help others, right? So that was a big fundamental moment where things really just shifted for me. So let's get into some of the strangest paranormal experiences I have had as a medium. So I'm going to start off with this one. This was probably the most unexpected. So one thing that I do is I will do house clearings. And so a house clearing is I'm going into the house and I'm seeing, are there any, spirits that are trapped here, clearing any energy that might be stuck or stagnant. If there's any areas of the house where I feel like there's a blockage, then, just kind of doing some work there, and all sorts of things can come up. A couple things that come up quite a bit are like people are having like sexual blockages in the bedroom, like the relationship is very stagnant in like the intimacy area. I'll do a lot of work there to kind of clear out that energy. But obviously a lot of the work is to do with spirits. Most people want a house clearing because they know there's something in there. They're just not sure what it is. Sometimes they're fearful of it as well. So I'm doing a cluster of house clearings one day and I did a house that had a ton of deers on the wall, like the deer heads that people will mount if they're hunters. And I walked into the space and immediately what hit me was a deer spirit. And I don't do animal communication. Like, I know a lot of people have that gift, but that's not a gift that I have. So my interactions do not normally involve animals at all. And the only thing was that there was this deer that was basically the deer that was mounted right at the front that was sort of like, what the hell is this? What is this, huh? You just, you think I'm a prize? And I was like, oh, I am equally as horrified as you are. I personally don't like when people have dead things in their houses. It's always given me weird energy since I was a kid. And now that I do this sort of work, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know from a karmic perspective that it's good to have that energy, right? Because when we think about karma, anytime we do something that harms another living being and they didn't agree to that experience, that's going to cause, negative karma. So then there's, me in this house talking to this, dear spirit that is very, very upset about that. And then I go into the garage, there's another one in there, but essentially the one in the front room that stopped me and the one in the garage were actually related. And so it was kind of like this moment of like reuniting them, and then like they were fine and they just kind of went on their way. So it was weird. That was definitely one of my weirdest ones to date. Like I said, I don't come in contact with a lot of animals, so that one was very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about what it means when a spirit is stuck. Because the next experience I'm about to tell you all about is me going to a graveyard near Yale University. And for the record, I was not intending to go to Yale University. I didn't even know Yale was in the city that I was in. I was working this fair in Connecticut, I think. Yeah. I was working a fair in Connecticut. And there's just like this place that I want to like bebop to like sit down by the water, like read a book. And there was like a restaurant up there I wanted to try. So I'm just like bopping around the day before the fair. And a couple weird things happened that day. First thing that happened is I go to the dispensary because I'm a dispensary girly. So I go to the dispensary, and if you've ever been to a dispensary, everything comes in these freaking child-proof containers, right? Child-proof containers, they are Madison-proof, they are. So I end up having to like get my scissors to try to open this container. And in the process, like the scissors slip and I like cut my hand right here. And I'm like sitting in the dispensary parking lot when this happens, right? Like, so I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So immediately I just like start giving Reiki to it to like stop the bleeding. Cause it was like pretty, you get in here, it's not good. And then I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the Walgreens or CVS that's like, a couple stores over, go to the bathroom, clean it up, all of that. And I noticed immediately when I started giving it Reiki, it didn't stop bleeding completely, but like the blood that was gushing stopped at least, so I could like get it to calm down till I could get to the Walgreens or CVS. And then by the time I got there and I went to wash my hand, literally all the blood had stopped and it was almost like half clotted. And I was like, whoa, that was like a really fast turnaround time, just using Reiki to try to heal something happening real time, right? Because I was kind of like, what the fuck am I supposed to do about this, But I say that to say, we're having a little bit of a ramble episode today because I'm just telling y'all all sorts of different stories. So what does it mean when a spirit gets stuck? So whenever people pass away, if they pass away and it was very unexpected, or they're still very attached to people or things here in the 3D world, then that spirit can essentially get stuck. And so what that means is that spirit is kind of attached to that location until a medium or an angelic being or whatever comes and interacts with that being and essentially moves it into the light. So since I have been doing mediumship work, I've done a lot of this just being places where there was spirits that needed to be moved into the light. So I kind of have like a little bit of a process now that I follow whenever I do this. And so I am just got done with this like Reiki experience in the Walgreens bathroom. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go get lunch. I'm gonna chill by the water. And the place that I ended up going ends up being like across the street from Yale. And this is how much I don't know about like prestigious schools. Whenever I was writing my notes, I wrote down that I was in the Harvard graveyard. And then I had to be like, Brandon, is Harvard in Connecticut? He's like, I don't know. So then I have to Google like what prestigious school is in Connecticut to find out that it was actually Yale. So the point is, gorgeous, gorgeous graveyard. And I'm, I got my food, I'm just kind of walking along, and I just get like energetically pulled into this graveyard. It is no coincidence either that this happens to be on October the 31st. The fair was like November like 1st to the 3rd. So I came in on Halloween. So I get drug in, kind of energetically drug into this graveyard, and it ends up just being like this full afternoon of me just working with all these stuck spirits there to help move them to the other side, to connect them with angels that can move them into the light. And it was so crazy because it was truly this moment where it felt like nothing else existed outside of this work that I was doing. And it was really interesting because there were some spirits that I came into contact with that were stuck, but like they weren't ready to move, right? They were just like, yeah, it's cool that you're here to like, move me to the other side so I can kind of move about freely, but I'm not ready for that, right? Not my thing. So that was interesting because it was the first time that I ever really had spirits that were like, no, I'm good, I'll stay here. And it was also something that was very energetically draining, right? Like afterwards, I was just like, whew. But also it was something where like I felt really good because I knew that at the end of the day, what we're here to do is to raise the vibration of the planet, and stuck spirits ultimately like drag down the vibration of the planet, and those souls are just suffering, So that is some interesting things that I've been doing from a mediumship perspective. Okay, so let's talk about other cool stories. So I also teach Akashic Records. And so Akashic Records, if you've never heard of it, is going in and tapping into your soul's library. You're connecting with a spirit guide, and you can tap into things like soul purpose and past lives, all of this information that exists in the Akashic Records. So I teach a class where I teach people to go in and access their own Akashic Records. So I'm doing this class, and the lady that I'm doing the class with, we do channeled sessions in the class where you'll go into your Akashic Records channel, and then we'll come out and talk about what your experience was and kind of decode it if we need to. So she comes out of her, session, and she's like, I went somewhere, I know exactly where I went. I'm like, tell me more. She's like, my favorite place to do any sort of outdoor activity is Chimney Rock, which is a state park in North Carolina. And she's like, specifically, there's this fall there that's called Hickory Nut Falls, and that's where I went. And I was like, that's crazy, because I have a little bingo board that I put on my fridge that was just a ton of different hiking and camping things I wanted to do, right? I did a California trip last year, so like half of them were like California stuff, the other probably half was like North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia stuff. And I was like, yeah, it's crazy is I have that exact hike on my 2025 little bingo board. Like not just like Chimney Rock, but like Chimney Rock, Hickory Nut Falls. And it was just like a spontaneous one where I like knew nothing about it and saw like a Pinterest about it being one of the most scenic hikes or whatever. So I was like, have to go there. So I'm having this session with her where I'm like, whoa, that's like a crazy synchronicity. So now I'm like, I obviously have to go there, right? So we go to Gorgeous State Park and Chimney Rock State Park in November over like my birthday time period. And we go to Hickory Nut Falls, and I almost felt like I got like an energetic upgrade when we were there. So it was almost like the more we were walking and getting close to the falls, the more I just kept feeling like I was getting like pulled, like energetically, but like in a good way, where it was like almost like, okay, pieces this way. Then we get there, and I just remember like standing under the waterfall and just really connecting with like my higher self, and almost feeling like I was getting this like DNA upgrade where like I was leaving behind a lot of things that maybe kept me small or kept me from being able to show up authentically. And so it was really cool because I felt like I had this just like crazy incredible spiritual upgrade there, if that makes sense. And so it's just so crazy how all of everything is intertwined, and it just like blew my mind. So let's talk about other things that have come through. On to the next story. So one thing that I have found, so a lot of the people that I work with, they might get, if you're clairvoyant, you might get images whenever you're connecting with spirits, and sometimes it takes some time to kind of figure out what some of the images mean. So one thing that happens to me, and I've kind of developed this language or understanding, is that if I connect with a spirit, let's say I'm doing a mediumship reading for somebody who wants to connect with their father who passed, and sometimes the spirit will come through almost in this like jacket of chains, where it almost feels like there's just like all these chains that are just like dragging them down. And then sometimes I can see a visual where it's almost like now that they've passed, they no longer have those chains. And the chains symbolize addiction and mental health, which if you've experienced addiction or mental health, you know they normally go hand in hand. Most of the time, addiction is essentially a cause of struggling with mental health, or something people are using to kind of self-medicate to deal with mental health. So normally what I find is if a spirit comes to me and they're kind of in chains, either they will kind of take those chains off, symbolizing to me that now that they've passed, they're no longer feeling drugged down by those worries or cares or challenges. Or sometimes I will kind of have to like psychically or like in like through my third eye like take those chains off of them, so that way they can kind of like step freely into the other side. And normally it depends just like how long it's been since they passed. If they just passed recently, they might still have the chains on, and then I might just kind of expedite that process by working with them. And if they've passed a long time ago, then likely it's like showing that they had the chains and the mental illness and the addiction and the challenges in this life, and now they've been able to part with that pain because they're now in the angelic realm. So that is something that like whenever you're doing this sort of work, you almost realize that there's certain correlations. And so the first time this showed up and I'm like having the conversation with the spirit about like, what is the chains about, all of that, then it showed up again in a different spirit later on. And I was like, okay, so is this basically like a language where like I know when a spirit shows up like that, this is what that means? So you almost put together kind of your own language and your own way of decoding things and knowing what different things mean based on conversations that you've had with different spirits, which sounds wild to say, but it's so fascinating. Okay, so last story that I want to tell you guys about is I want to tell you guys about some stories before I realized that spirits were stuck, and that's why they come to mediums. So whenever I was a kid, I would always see spirits. There were two really prominent spirits that stood out. One was this skateboarding boy that used to just skateboard through the neighborhood that I lived in growing up, and the other was this woman in all black that used to specifically stand at like the top of the stairs of this house we lived at. And now I can look back and say like, oh, those were stuck spirits that were coming to me as a medium saying, hey, can you help move me to the other side? But I didn't know that because I was just a kid. So I was just like, I don't know why these, spirits keep appearing to me. And so it's interesting. The more you start to work with the gifts, the more you start to realize what you can do with them. And I definitely think from a mediumship perspective, ways you can use this skill and ability to kind of raise the vibration. Doing readings for others that allow them to process their grief or get answers or closure or whatever they need. The other thing is moving, helping the spirits move, because stuck, negative, scared energy is ultimately just going to bring down the vibration, and, allowing them to go into the light ultimately raises the vibration. And if you are in the work of spirituality or light worker or whatever, it's all about really just raising the vibration of the planet. So things to come. If you guys want to join my 5D membership, it will be live for you guys to join anytime. And so my 5D membership is essentially like library of videos where you can learn how to access your Akashic records, do a past life regression on yourself, connect with your higher self. And I also have new videos or channeled messages that come out every single Monday. So a library that exists and constantly new content coming out. If you want to book a one-on-one reading with me, I do offer Akashic Records readings if you want to tap into your soul purpose, or if you also want to learn how to access your Akashic Records, I do have a Akashic Records class as well. So if you have mediumship abilities and that's why you were drawn to this and you want to explore them but you're not sure where to start, I do also offer a mediumship mentoring where I teach you how to go into the Akashic Records and connect with your spirit guides. That way you're doing it through a container of light and you can feel really protected in that process. Other things to come is I really feel drawn to do a retreat in Egypt this year in 2026. I have no idea what that looks like, but I just wanted to like tease that so I could start to get you guys' feedback, see if that's something that you guys would be interested in. But yeah, more to come as the year goes on. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you in the next episode. And as always, happy